Hey, greetings, one and all. Hey, let's do this. Chris Courtney here, new Pragmatic. Um, it's a nutty Tuesday. Yeah. This edition of the Feedback Loop brought to you by Total Panic. No, seriously. The world is on fire, but it is so cozy right in here. So I really thank you all for participating and submitting work. We got a couple things this morning to take a look at. Um, One is a project that I know Tegel's been. She's basically overhauling it, trying to bring it out of the 2016 2017 era into the modern age, which is so weird to think about because I've seen mobile design shift and change um, several times now. And some of it was stylistic, like when you think about the movement from the earliest iPhone designs, where like there was, you'd open the Books app and there was like wood paneling in the app, and then it went super clean, and you could see the influences of the Microsoft Metro design coming through, and that bled over, and now is really impacted material design, which is coming from Google, and then it shifted again when the phones started growing in size, and now all the phones are these kind of phablet phone tablet sized things, um, and that meant the from an ergonomic perspective, like where you put the buttons and whatnot, couldn't be like it was before. So the first change was really um, moving away from making everything so literal, like I have a bookshelf, so it needs to be wooden, and I need to make it look like books are on the wooden bookshelf, to being more just pure functional. And then the next move was, okay, so how do we make this work for the new sizes that we have? And I have to think that this latest move is the one that really matters. I could see that wood paneling coming back at any point in time. All somebody has to do is go, yeah, I'm tired of this clean design. I'm tired of the straightforward, color driven, flat design. I'm going to go back to um, the lifesaver mentality. And for those that are wondering, okay, well, Chris, what do you mean by lifesaver mentality? When OS X came out eons ago now, there were a lot of buttons that had these really colorful candy-like features to them, and it's said that Steve Jobs went to one of the designer's computers and took a piece of masking tape and taped a lifesaver to the side of their monitor and basically said, "I want it like that." That's what I mean by these candy-like features, literally candy. Um, we can go back there any minute. Any minute. All it takes is some sort of movement stylistically in the community, and we're back there. What I think is more important is, hey, where are your controls at? Can a user functionally use these things? I and it's weird because I used to be, I really didn't care how it worked. I just cared if it was pretty or not. And I think that's a mentality that permeates. It's important to prove that you know how it look. You know how to make something look good when you're a younger designer. Okay, but as you get older, you begin to care less and less about that, and you begin to understand that a good looking design is a byproduct of a good design, and you can have a good looking design that isn't a good design. And there is an understanding the difference of the two is a nuance that um, some people get that naturally. I didn't. Okay, I had to grow into it. I had to grow into understanding, and I think that's most designers. I do not think that there's just a ton of designers out there that just naturally just get function. So if you're like me, you've got to grow into this. Luckily, so long as you're paired with somebody who's always going to be trying to push you toward functional design, you're going to be okay. Because they're going to see when you're kind of meandering about, and they're going to go, I'm not sure that this is working the way that you think this is working. And that's where I come in. We also have Katie submitting her priority guides. And the one thing I want to mention about priority guides, and this is super important, is we're not designing anything. We are writing. The priority guides is a writing exercise, okay? So the moment that I see people bringing in color or saying I'm going to use 3 photos here, we're already moving out of the purpose of priority guides and into the sketching and wireframe portion, which is going to, it's just over there, okay? I know you want to get to it. And there was a new program that I wanted to, you know what? I say it's new. I can't call it new. That's not fair. I shouldn't call it new. But a good friend of the program was touting it yesterday, and I thought we might take a detour and look at that together today. As I like Figma, I do. But there's something called Auto Draw that I want to take a look at. So let's just go ahead and jump in. Stop talking, Chris. Stop talking. Get to the thing. Get to the thing. So we're going to start with Katie. Because, oddly enough, last night, Katie submitted her priority guides 16 minutes before Tejal submitted her updates from yesterday's feedback loop. So, Katie, you get to go first. And Katie, as you can, if you've been following along, you know that Katie is working through the Fresh Market project. I want to hide my tools so we can get in here and check it out. She's working on the Fresh Market project, and as we were stating the last time we talked, the important thing to do at this juncture is to understand when I'm working through these flows, do I have the logical parts here to make it from one step to the next? Because you've got your user flows. Those were done a week or so ago. You have your story map. You know what you're trying to build. You should have an idea of what you're going to be testing. So, this is all building up to a point where you're going to put this in front of a user and say, try to do X. Can you do Y? And it's in your priority guides that you're setting here, and you're kind of looking at this for the first time in terms of pages or views in a design. And you can begin to follow, like if I am on, let's just go through this exercise. If I'm here and I say, okay, I want to view the menu. Okay, so I view the menu, and that should take me over to a menu page. And here I am on the menu, and I've got a search bar, and I can see things that are on the menu. I can probably, there's some filtering up here. I select Turkey Club, and I add it to the cart. Okay, can I go to a cart? I've added something to the cart, or I can either add it to the cart, or I can view Turkey Menu, or Turkey Club, which means that I need to view the meal. So this is a Turkey Club here. It's a steak bowl, but follow along with me. Not sure what the red is. Okay, and that's one of the things that I mentioned just before we got started. When I start seeing colors leaking in here, it's like, yeah, I'm not. You're beginning to signal and leave notes for yourself, which is fine. It's fine, but I don't necessarily know if we need the color there at this stage. You may want that later. Okay, not saying that you don't want it at some point. But here we have the steak bowl, and I can add it to cart. Okay, so now I've got two things saying I need a cart. All right, so we have view cart now. Yay! All right, we have view cart, and oddly enough, you have a steak bowl and a chicken fajita bowl. All right, so this is the cart, and the cart basically says that I can continue shopping, or I can check out. I don't necessarily know if you need a cart logo in the corner if you're in the cart. So that's something to think about. A lot of times, you'll find that when you're in the cart, you can leave the cart, or you can stay in the cart and move forward. But that's about it. So you've got your you've got this. So we're gonna go check out. So now I need to check out. So I've got to head over here to the checkout. And we talked about this last time. So checkout, I've got my order summary. So we had talked about the entry of this information, and I believe that's where this iteration 4 comes in. And the thing that I want to emphasize is that you're beginning, you naturally made this wider. You made this iteration wider, okay? You're not going to have a 2-column design on your phone, okay? The whole purpose of the priority guide is to set priority for the order in which you're going to receive this information. When we begin sliding things side by side, we're basically saying, okay, I'm not going to make a choice between these two things. I'm just going to say they're both important. And that's something you can do and you can get into on the desktop. Here on mobile, I want to just go top bottom, okay? And the reason I start the process here on mobile, the priority guide on mobile, is so we're always thinking mobile first. Mobile first, everything else later. If it works on mobile, it'll work on the other things. It won't be optimized for the other things, but it will work on them. So that's the thinking there, okay? So you've got your form, and you're basically saying shipping, new address. So this would be if I want to enter a new address, I should get that. I should basically either get like use address on file, and here's the address on file, or add an address. And then you could save that address if necessary. This is interesting. It's meal delivery. I'm not sure that there is I'm not sure what express shipping would look like for, like, I'm getting this am I getting this delivered like in 15 minutes? Like, what? Let's think about what that definition of express shipping is, because what I'm sensing here is I'm sensing like research from around the industry, or research from, hey, what's like Amazon shipping like? We have to remember that all examples of shipping will not necessarily apply to what we're doing, okay? But the most important thing is understanding that you have this flow. And you've got these arrows here. What I would hope that you would see is that this is probably 1, 2, 3 different pages, not necessarily one page that we just scroll down. And this is something that you'll understand more and I'm going to try to find my way back to a browser. Back to a browser, please. Let's come over here. And let's go over here to, actually, I had this pulled up earlier. We're going to look at making forms better. And one of the things that we do when we make forms better is we break things up, all right? The long form, not a good idea. You can take that long form that was really more than what we were displaying, and you can break it up into 3 forms that, you just have a next button that guides you through until you're ready to submit. Again, this one right here, this is form design. I'm not really sure why that's just coming up as new Pragmatic, but if we go to better forms, new Pragmatic, better forms, this is something that we cover in the interface design program, but you're in that spot where we begin thinking about what that's going to be like, how to best tackle this problem. So, and really, up until this point, you haven't had a reason to break it up. Okay, you haven't had. You've done everything else necessary to really begin putting this together. But now you're in a spot where form construction comes into play, and the only reason I mention it is you already have it broken up into forms, 4 spots. Okay, so I just want to make sure that when you're thinking about how this is designed, you're not seeing one long page, you're seeing 4 separate ones. Okay, the next thing, and it starts with cart. So you technically already got this going. All right, I'm just encouraging you to expand on it. The next thing for you, though, Katie, is the microcopy. You know, what happens when this address is not an area, is outside the delivery area? Is there an error message that pops up? What happens when somebody doesn't give you the zip code? What is that message going to be? What happens when somebody forgot to give you the expiration date, or they didn't give you a valid credit card number? Like these messaging error messages and whatnot that need to go back to the user, those have to work their way into here, and that's really the next chapter of work for you. Okay, so you have the bones now to begin layering on what that microcopy is going to be. And another thing to think about is, you know, up here in the menu, if you go through and you put through a search and there's no options, no matched options, for instance, what does that copy look like? What is the feedback to the user? Is it just a blank screen? Or is there a bit of copy there that says, hey, we don't have any matched options. Perhaps you would like to try a salad. I'm riffing, okay? I'm definitely sure try a salad is not the phrasing that you probably want to use there. But I definitely want to encourage you to think about empty states, to think about, and we write extensively on this in the microcopy chapter. So dive into microcopy. Let's layer it in. And remember, microcopy is just coming in and basically duplicating this. So what I would do is I would just come in and, well, I can't duplicate it here, but I can show you how to duplicate it. I'll create a new screen. And over here on pages, if I said, okay, here's page 1, and I went and I basically used a control click, and you can duplicate it. I would duplicate this priority guide. So I would do the control click here, duplicate it, and then simply say exercise microcopy. Okay, and then once you've got that microcopy, let's turn this back in. I'll leave some notes on your program journal, because you submitted the link to this Figma file and feedback loop. So I'll leave some notes on the program journal for you. And I know we have a meeting later this week, so my hope is that we can get the microcopy in, and then we can really talk about like design and sketching in that session on Friday that we've got coming up. And by the way, if you're watching this and you have not scheduled your session for the week, feel free to do that. It's you have access to me every single week, so there's never a bad time to go ahead and schedule that session if you are a enrolled student here at New Pragmatic. Speaking of enrollments, Tejal, thank you for re-upping yesterday. Tejal again is working through her portfolio, and she's been on her portfolio for a while, but now she has jumped in and really focused on updating one of her older projects. And she's got two new options. So it says I have two options, V2.2 and V2.3. And if you want to look what V1 looked like, you can still come here and look at V1. V1 looks a lot different than V2. But it says Chris break this, so I'm here to break things. So it says V2 is action sheets, 2.3 is floating action button. And this is something that we discussed during yesterday's feedback loop. The goal of each option is to make it easier to use with large screens. Look forward to your feedback. All right, let's do it. Let's get in here. So one of the things that I basically look at, and here's V2.1. Yeah, okay, so this is V2.1. And one of the things that I look at often, and I've always done this, is I look at the native apps. Okay? And in the native apps, I begin to ask a lot of questions of my solution. Does my solution need all the extra accoutrements, or should I be simplifying it to be closer to what the native app is trying to do? Now, the accoutrements often are the difference between the native app and what I've got. Okay? And the question here is, well, why wouldn't I just use the native app? And honestly, like the mapping app is okay. The Apple Maps is okay. It's really not a good transit solution. If you've ever tried using Apple Maps that way, I mean, you can see transit. You can kind of look and see where the buses are, but nothing like this. This is really what Tedral has here is really meant for bus transit. So let's see what she did. She said took color off the bottom bar. This makes the screen look bigger. Adds the much needed contrast. What do I think? You now see this at the bottom, the bus number, time, reach a stop. You don't see destination route info by default. I did give this more space to map. Also, as we've figured out that our same location more than 3 times per week, they already know the destinations and stops. They need to know how far the bus is. Okay, that's fine. It's gray, yay! So she switched that around. That was colored yesterday, or colorized. So action sheet, that is correct. You're basically triggering it off the bottom. The question I have here as I was kind of walking through this, is like, okay, I'm on the bus page, right? I think this bottom part just didn't switch colors. Like, I believe that I'm on the schedule page here. So and this is something that when you go to test it, when you put the prototype together, that would cause an issue. Like, people would be like, wait, what? How did I get from here and I'm on the bus page to here? You know, how did that happen? And then you've got the date picker. And what's interesting about this is now that bottom nav has gone away. Like, how did the bottom nav go away? Which, by the way, I like. This is where I want to be. Like, this is kind of the world I want to be in. But how did that bottom nav go away? I don't know. I don't know how that bottom nav went away, because when I hit pick date, this just slid up. It didn't make the bottom nav go away. That's not typically what would happen. So those are some questions that I have. Don't worry, I'm gonna take you over the Apple Maps thing in a second. All right, I want to look at this first. So here you move the clock ticker up, try to circle, but since this shape is like the floating But like this, since the shape is not like the floating action button. What do you think? I think that makes a lot of sense. In many ways, I think the floating action button could replace this bottom nav. Just between you and me. And there is some precedent for that. Like if you hit the bottom nav, you can have these controls come up. They kind of spring out of it and spring back. And it could be each of these if you wanted it to be. I've also seen bottom navs like become the slider and slide in and out. I've also seen it lift up, and there's lots of things you can do with the floating nav. Here the floating nav went away, and now I've got this kind of card-like thing. Like, okay, what do you think about adding a second accent color? Do you think adding a second accent color is a good idea? I don't know where else to use it, but since this is this element is the most important one on the screen, should I make it stand out? I like that idea. I don't dislike making the most important. What I like with things that are time oriented is I like using color to indicate urgency, and I might only use that color when like something's 5 minutes away. And I've had colors go from like green to orange to red, depending on where that bus is. And I say this because one of the first, I've done a couple of these. I've done a couple of bus trackers before, so I when I talk about this, I'm talking about it from the perspective of having built a couple of these. Now, my organization was never like this because I had a different sized phone. Okay, the phones were much smaller when I was doing my work. So here you've got centered heading, expand the list of. Okay, so this is basically giving me information about that specific bus. Here you've got this, and overall, I don't mind what's happening here. It's just this bottom nav is bugging me a bit. And I kind of get what could happen. You could click on this and it could bring the schedule up, and you've blurred out the background, and that's fine. The thing that I look at though is, and I'm going to come over here to Apple Maps. So here's Apple Maps. All right. Apple Maps, when it loads, just has the bottom nav showing, asking you, all right, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? It does have this little temperature reading, air quality index, has a little bit of mapping information to the top. If you slide this drawer up, or action sheet, you still have search. You have these favorites. Favorites, in my opinion, that's like your My Bus. Like, if I tapped on home, I would get a view that basically, if this was like the 83 bus, I would get a view that would show, okay, basically this. It would show me this bus with this view. The question is, what would happen? How would I get out of this? And this typically is where you would have like an X, so you would you would X out of it. But I think this bottom nav is the part that doesn't make a lot of sense in your current design. You have a schedule, you have a bus, and you have search, and that's all pretty much handled here. and I think that overall, if you wanted to have a floating action button here instead of that, that's fine. If you do you need the orientation information up here? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not one that really thinks that you have to have it. It would be helpful to have this part is more of like what's being displayed on the map. This part is find me. So the find me part might be really interesting to have, because if I hit that, it would just reorient to where I'm at, and then you could begin your search from there. Or again, you could use this search bar. If you want to go to my buses, you just swipe up and click the one. The schedule becomes an issue, because it's how is it, I guess that's the question. And sorry about that. When I look over here on schedule, it looks like it's the schedule for a particular bus, but it's at a specific stop. So I'm guessing that I'm trying to figure out, how do I get to that stop? Have I clicked here to get to this stop? I know if I click schedule that it will likely go to the screen, but I'm not sure. I'm not necessarily sure. Trying to think of how to phrase this. I see the bus. I see the time away. I think that's all fine. It's the presence of this bar that bugs me. I see schedule. If I, but how do I get that specific stop from the schedule page? Because if I click schedule, this information is not necessarily tethered to whatever I was looking at on the bus page. It seems like I should basically see all stops, and then I guess what I'm saying is, from a usability standpoint, I can't figure out how I got to Washington and State. It's almost like I feel like I should search for it, right? I should search for Washington, and then I should get a view for Washington and State. And then when I click on Washington State, it should have a schedule of buses that are there. So I struggle a bit with how we've gotten to this view. I don't struggle with how you're displaying this. That works fine. I struggle with how we got to this view. And if that's the case, if search and my bus are most important, and schedule is something that presents itself once you have either search for a bus or a stop, then it seems like I've eliminated schedule from the mix, and it's really search for a route or stop. You search, it pulls up some sort of listing. You have a search result, which would probably be the whole page. And then from that, you have, stops or routes. And, what I see there is I see stops or routes, and I'm going to hide my guides here. I really see this being, and for the record, there are lots of UI kits out there. I'm going to go over here and just grab a segmented controller really fast. That's a table view. Where are my segmented controllers? You would think that I would have all this already picked up. Find seg. assets. There we go. I guess I got to drag it over here. Okay, there's a segmented controller. Delete. Let's bring it over here. So I've got a segmented controller. This is really big by comparison, so I'm just going to drag in a new frame. This frame will be for a phone. There it goes. One thing I love about all of these tools is that they pretty much just work. So here, I've got a, although it seems like I've blown that up. Oh, it's because this is the dark mode. So here I've got, I could have this and say, okay, well, your routes and your stops, and I could search, whatever search term I've got is up here. And if I want to go back over here and it seems like that would be one of these large labels. Goodness, there's so many files here. Seems like it's right over here. Yeah, here we go. So I don't know if it's large. It's probably like this, though, to be honest with you. So if I had something like this that was swiped up, and this would be just say I search for Washington Street, okay? And then I would see routes related to Washington Street, stops related to Washington Street, and then you would move forward from there, rather than having to click on schedule and not necessarily knowing what was going to happen there. All the rest of this works. Like, I really think that if you clicked on, basically if you clicked on, say, stops, and it was this stop, basically everything you have here works. Okay? It's like nothing changes. It's how you get to it that I want to focus on. Okay? So I do think that there is some adjustment, and in the grand scheme of things, I think it's the action sheet. I don't necessarily think it's the floating action button. I think it's the action sheet that you need. And if you can utilize the action sheet, I think you can get rid of the bottom nav. And this you simplify the flow. So essentially, this becomes, I want to search, or I want to go directly to my stop. Okay, and you could have it to where it just preloads on your favorite stop or your favorite bus route. Like when you open it up, it says, hey, the number 6 is however far away, and you could preload it. It's going to ask for permission. Can I check your location? So there's going to be a screen that when you first start up, it's going to say, can I check your location? And you're asking for that permission to check the location, because if I can check your location, I can automatically orient the map, and then I can tell you where your favorite bus is, right? So I think that there's a few things here that align together really allow you to take advantage of the updates that you've made. But I think the first thing that you've got to do is you've got to get rid of this bottom bar, and you need to reorient around the action sheet that you've added. Okay? So let's take a look and see if we've got anybody else in. It looks like it's just me announcing that feedback loop is starting. So I'm going to leave it here. Katie, I think you're on the right path. I think we need to get into the next chapter and start layering in that microcopy. Tagil, I think you're on the right path, but now that we've got the action sheet in, now it is the removal of the nav bar because we don't need it anymore. Search is key. Routes are key. From search gives you the possible locations that could be attached to a schedule. And yeah, I think you have everything that you need to move forward. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Chris Courtney. This has been the Feedback Loop. I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Wash your hands. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Be well.